to co-host with me or however way you want to do it. But I actually have met this person, so I'd love to introduce her.
Please take over, David.
Yeah. Well, it's not taking over. I enjoyed the conversation on the phone with Alexia Allen. And hey, how are you? I get to see you. I was wondering who this other person is up there and with the yurt in the background. Welcome. We're excited for you to share so much. And I had a great opportunity to talk to you about all the many things you guys do on your farm. And I hope we can get part of the mandala, but I know you're going to talk today about Draft Horses Q&A on the homestead. And take it away. And we're here. When you want to call on questions, people can either raise their hand or unmute their mic, and I can just say, hey, such and such has a question. And then we also have Cassie and Julie, and they'll also take the questions in the chat and say, oh, we have this person with this question. So you have a support team here to support you.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. I did send in a PowerPoint, and then I realized I hadn't told you I sent in a PowerPoint. Okay. And there might be a way for me to screen share as well. So
I can grab that PowerPoint if it was uploaded to the cloud, the drive.
Yes, it was.
I'll get that online really quick for you. And
perfect. I can give my little intro here, and feel free to chime in, folks, too, if there are ways for me to speak louder or quieter or do something different. I know a little bit more about farming with horses than I do about Zoom. So this is great. I'm so glad to be here. And I put my little name in the box as Alexia Allen of Hawthorn Farm because I am made out of Hawthorn Farm. I have been living and eating here since 2003 when it was a suburban house on a few acres of sad lawn. And in 2011, my then sweetheart said, hey, let's give ourselves a pop quiz of eating only hand harvested food for 2 days. We can probably do it. Like, even if we don't have anything to eat for 2 days, we know we'll survive. So let's try it. And I had a little bit of dried corn, and we had a frozen chicken, and we had eggs from the chickens who were still alive and laying, and we had kale in the garden. And we actually did just fine. We didn't use any spices. We did miss salt a little bit, but we said this was so much fun. We didn't generate any trash in the kitchen. Let's keep going with this idea. And let's just keep going with our skills and see if eventually we can do an entire year of hand harvested food. So that's what we did in 2017. We had practiced for 6 years of, well, what do we eat in December? And what can we eat in February? And what can we eat in March? Like, how do we build up our hand harvesting skills so that we can eat really well all year long at this latitude? We're about 20 miles northeast of Seattle in the town of Woodinville. And we did it in 2017. Like, if we wanted salt, we went to the ocean and got seawater and evaporated it for salt. And we capped local maple trees, and people helped us so much. We got amazing gifts of food from community all over the place. Like, a friend in Hawaii sent us cacao nibs that she had harvested off a tree. Somebody gave us a squirrel they trapped in their backyard, and we just went ahead and ate it. It was amazing to live that connected and to share food in that way. So that's been a big part of the inspiration. Our mission has been reclaiming suburbia and creating a connected place where people can eat and learn. Another one of our mottos is Hawthorn heals the heart, and living in a way that connects people together and people with the earth has been so important to us. And of course, acknowledging the place where I live and work, and that it is Snoqualmie tribal territory. We just put up some lovely signs made by our friend Jeff Davis, acknowledging that fact and respecting the elders of past, present, and future. So that's is part of our ongoing journey of learning how to live well in community, and of course, more than just the human community. And draft ponies have been a really fun part of that in recent years. And part of that way to answer that question of how do we deal with the backbreaking and labor involved and actually not have it be backbreaking. So I really appreciate your talk, Terry. It was fascinating. I love the discussion that came out of that because I have a cellular sense in my body of what it takes to grow that food, to have that connection to a landscape where the health of the soil is actually the health of my body. I started developing different food cravings or hungers. During our food challenge year, I realized that was related to the health of the soil I was eating from. And so changing that and studying soil life has been just fascinating. I just love geeking out on soil. And of course, it's an endless world to explore. So appreciate the expertise gathered here today. I'm always in the process of learning, happy to get feedback, and I'll pause at the end of each slide for some questions. And of course, there's space for questions at the end as well. My understanding is I'm going until 7-ish or 7 o'clock. So feel free to set me straight if I'm going over that or if that's a different time than I've got written down. And yeah, I'm glad to see some names I recognize here, like Merla chiming in about the presentation. Merla's been to our farm a number of times. So the big adventure for us in the past few years has been horsepower. I tell all the people who come and work here in any capacity, I say, there is no task here that is worth hurting yourself for. Like, if your body wants to sit on the porch and shell beans, we can make that happen. If you want to go shovel this load of compost, we've got that too. Really tune in. There's no task that's worth hurting yourself for. And I have been involved with horses for, gosh, over half my life. Everything from taking riding lessons when I was like a little 7-year-old perched on the ancient old horse going around the dusty track, all the way through training horses through high school. And I finally had my own horse for about 10 years and did horseback therapy and a variety of things with her. And when I started farming full time, I said, wow, I want to have horses in my life, but I don't really have the time or inclination to ride recreationally anymore the way I used to. That gave me so many lessons, all that riding that I had done throughout my young life. But now I wanted to accomplish tasks. I wanted to work on my acreage with the help of horses. And fortunately, I found 2 Amish ponies, retired Amish ponies. They were 8 years old and 10 years old, but they're actually more like 22 and 26. But that's fine. I don't need them to do a lot of physical work. I need them to teach me how to respectfully use draft horsepower and teach others. What really pushed me over the edge into getting draft ponies was noticing that I teach a lot of kids farm skills here at the farm. And I thought, how engaging can it be, to be able to present these horses to these kids who are learning about farming. So our farm is about 8 acres. We have 2 ponies, or 2.5, as you'll see throughout this presentation. And then, of course, me. I definitely love this. And my husband, Daniel, is great at just like, okay, we'll just fix up the barn for you. Like, I'm going to draw the line at you getting camels, Alexia, but let's help you out with the ponies. Let's make this work. So I absolutely love farming with horses. And how do I change the slide on the screen? Do I just ask you, David? Aha, there we go. Thank you. So why ponies? Well, most of the world's farmers use draft animals, and this is the historical norm. If you had work to do and there was an animal willing to do it, whether it's the burro bringing home the firewood or the horses pulling the logs out of the forest, there's probably an animal who's willing to work in this way. Horses find draft work in harness, more ergonomic than riding. So they lean into pressure and they'll just lean into their harnesses and pull a load forward. It's capturing local solar energy. Sometimes I've gone to, farmer events or something and I say, oh yeah, I've got solar powered tractors. My horses will eat the grassy strip along the driveway and then they'll be able to work in the fields the next day. Like, that's pretty awesome. That is the actual sunlight that is hitting the land right here. And that's my constant quest as I think about nutrient flows, as I think about energy flows through our farm and how we can eat really well from those energy flows. Like, there's sunshine hitting the land. It's making the grass grow. And the horses can eat that grass, which I don't really want to eat as much grass as the horses want to eat. They will eat that and they will translate that energy into cultivating the squash field or the cornfield, and I want to eat squash and corn. So it seems to work out. Solar powered tractors. Their exhaust is fertilizer. Like, the composting power of horse manure is awesome. Every spring I pile up all the fresh horse manure I can get. I make a hot bed inside one of our hoop houses, and that's where I start my tomatoes and I start cucumbers, and we're eating cucumbers in June here because I've started them on a heated bed. So there are just lots of ways to use horse manure in our landscape. It breaks down really nicely, and I appreciate the way that, again, the nutrients move from the roady, the weedy roadside edges, and from the hay I buy. I do buy hay for them, and it comes into our garden, comes into the more nutrient cycle.
Alexia, do you want questions as we see them, or do you want to wait until you're finished?
Actually, bring on a question right now if you've got one.
All right. Do you only feed them from your land, or do you need to bring in outside feed to supplement?
Great question. I've experimented with haymaking on my land, and I can feed my goats pretty well from that if I try hard. And I use a scythe for making hay. Absolutely love it. But it's a lot to feed these two horses. These horses are bigger than I actually need, but they were the best trained horses that I could find. So I do buy hay for them. If I had smaller horses, I might not need to. And if I had horses who weren't so old and didn't have the metabolic issues that these horses have, I could feed them from the land. But for now, I buy feed. Yeah. So great question about the nutrient flows. So horses are fully compostable at the end of their lifespan, unlike your average tractor. And sometimes I kind of like say, well, they're even edible at the end of their, working lifespan. If we want to look at the kind of historical norm for horses. But I really love that, again, they come from the landscape, they go back to the landscape. I really enjoy not having to deal with excess materials that are coming onto the property. They reproduce themselves. I mean, not mine in particular, but it is a self-sustaining source. I say you never go into the barn and find a new baby tractor, but you can produce your own replacements, again, from solar energy. I love the sense of history I get working with the horses. Wow, this is connecting to something very deep inside me about animal husbandry, about working at a horse's pace and not at a tractor's pace. I understand so much more about how land use patterns work, why they are the way they are. And working with horses encourages me to see the land in a different way. I just can't do as much damage as quickly with the horses. Of course, I have to say, the Dust Bowl was created by people plowing with horses. It's not that horses in and of themselves are a panacea for land management issues. But I have done enough work with horses to see that the hooves on the ground is kinder to soil, does less compaction than having a great big tractor. going across the land. That's been my experience working with my horses on rented land that has a serious plow pan, serious issues of compaction, and working with the horses lightened that soil up beautifully. It's like the land is happy to have the hooves and the feet, is my sense. And I build physical and emotional skills. I'm walking behind these horses a lot, and that gets me out, that gets them out. I have to be physically aware and attentive and present when I'm working with them. It is such a wonderful awareness to have, to be communicating verbally and non-verbally with this other creature, two bodies moving across the landscape. And I am asking a creature to work, and this creature is much, much bigger than I am, and I have to have the emotional clarity and leadership to do that well. I'm not saying I do that perfectly. Oh my gosh, my poor horses are so forgiving, but they are forgiving, and they will continue to work, and they will continue to teach me. I had written this down, and I was like, is this actually true? But I was going to say it's a little harder to be a jerk when you're driving horses than when you're driving a tractor, is kind of my experience. Like, the horses give feedback about how we behave, in a great way. And it's incredibly fun. I mean, I just have so much fun working with them. And as you can see here, they engage the next generation of farmers, of land stewards. This is amazing. I mean, poor Duke is standing there like, oh, I just had teenagers braiding my mane for 2 hours, ugh. But okay, and of course, these teenagers and these young folks are just thrilled to work with the horses. It's a big draw to what we do here and to the skills we have to teach. Yeah, so those are a few answers of why ponies. I absolutely love them. And here we are out cultivating. This is what we did instead of plowing out on my rented land. So horses like traveling in long straight lines. And so I had a 600-foot long field where I could go work with them. And we're pulling a cultivator there. Agricultural use is a pretty typical common use for horses, common use for draft animals. I don't want to leave out the mules and the donkeys and the oxen and, the yaks, the many, many creatures who work in draft here with humans. When I say in draft, I mean the animal is pulling something that a human is asking it to pull. So agriculture is one great use. That's often how we use them. And then there's also transportations. We have carts we can hitch up. You can pull sleds, all kinds of things to have the horses move items from one place to another, whether that's people. I mean, I could hitch up and trot down to the grocery store. As you just walk down to the grocery store. And you've probably heard of the Teamsters Union, or these truckers. It's called Teamsters because they used to be driving teams of horses, two horses working together like Duke and Dolly are doing there. That's a team. So horses getting from place to place is super important, super useful. Sometimes cars will zoom past me on the road and I'm like, yeah, you might be going fast now, but I'm going to keep going. Like, draft animals are going to continue well past this little petroleum bubble that we're in right now. So, I'll just catch up to you then. Speed now if you want. And I've seen a lot of horses used very effectively for logging, horses and oxen. Again, it's lighter on the land. There's less compaction, and the horses know their job. I've loved it for when I'm cultivating here too. I can steer Dolly in a pattern, and if I do that twice, she knows the pattern, and she will do it on autopilot and just keep doing it until I ask her to change. So that's awesome to have an animal who will learn and contribute to the work in that way is fantastic. I've heard, loggers talking about, oh yeah, the horse knows exactly where to go. The horse knows how to line up the logs so that I can stack them. A good horse is a treasure for sure. And in horse logging, well, I heard one horse logger who was pulling woods out of the forest. Somebody drove by and said, you're never going to be done at that rate. And of course, that logger could respond, yeah, that's the point. There's a steady source of employment. There's a steady source of revenue coming out of this forest for generations when I'm working it selectively with horses versus just coming in with the big skidders and just clear cutting a bunch of it. So yeah, that's a little bit of my thoughts on that. Challenges. There are pros and cons to this whole thing. There are trade-offs, and there are plenty of people who say, I love using tractors actually, or wow, like my granddad is really glad when we can get rid of the horses. It's probably lucky for horses today that the people who are using them are primarily using them by choice. And in this country, it's really significantly the Amish or the plain people who are using horses in their farming and in their work today. And it requires significant skill. This is not just like, oh, let's just grab a random pony and throw some straps on them. I am humbled by how much skill it takes, how much attention it takes, how much adjustment it takes to do this properly. So when I started, and probably still, I would say I know enough to get myself into trouble. So it really helps to have a mentor. This is a skill that gets passed on, mentor to student, and requires hands-on and individual attention. It's not about just reading a manual. So that's definitely one of the challenges. And there's daily care. Yeah, I don't have to go buy grass for a tractor, but or don't have to buy gas for a tractor, but I've got to go out and scoop that manure every day and feed those horses and pick their hooves. Can we zoom back to the previous slide? Okay, yeah. And then for another thing that I didn't put in here is finding equipment. There's a great auction in Oregon, but I can't really go down to the hardware store and like get a new cultivator. That cultivator that Dolly is pulling there, that was, someone pulled it down out of their barn and gave it to me because they were moving. And it's probably 100 years old. I have a disc that was built in 1894 and that I've had to kind of renovate and use. So yeah, finding equipment is a challenge. I did buy a modern cultivator that was manufactured more recently than my cell phone, I'll put it that way. So there are a lot of people catering to the Amish and to people who are getting into that kind of thing. And I see there's a question about a magazine for draft horse farming. There's several. The one I subscribe to is Small Farmers Journal, which has a lot of great inspiration. And I've been reading that for years, and that's part of what nudged me into really looking at draft horses. So, and the Farm in Cottage Grove does great workshops and stuff too. I think that's, workhorse workshops maybe. So great places to learn. I'd recommend if you're interested, go and learn in person. Like YouTube is only gonna get you so far in this realm. And one last challenge here is a lot of the tasks that I do anyways require multiple people. You see me here in this picture, I had my welder neighbor make me a handle so that I could try to stabilize the cultivator with one hand while I drove Dolly with another. But it works better to have one person on the cultivator and one person steering the pony. So that's a bit of a challenge. We did have two 20-somethings visiting the farm who just hitched themselves up to the cultivator. So they were going to put the ponies out of a job. But we do typically need a person to steer the pony and a person to handle the implement if it's a precision implement. Okay, next up. And really, I just can't even tell you that it's fully a practical option for me at my scale. I just love, love, love working with the horses. I'm a better human when I do it. If I'm out there with the horses every day, I am so happy. And that's totally worth it for me. These horses enjoy the work, or at least that's my job as a teamster, is to make sure that my horses are comfortable in their work. And they like it. Like, they seem happier if they've taken a stroll, if they've pulled the cultivator for an hour, if they've had that interaction with a human, they know that they're contributing to the landscape. And I really enjoy that. And also, considering everything that horses have done for humans through history, I really like being able to take these old workhorses and give them a useful retirement. I'm in the middle of suburbia. There are a few other people with horses in the neighborhood, but not many. And to have horses working the land here, it lets us cultivate more land than we would otherwise. And it also gives a model. It lets people see horses. We've got schools, and I'm driving those horses past the school every chance I get to just role model that future of working with horses. I've heard some teamsters say, wow, it's not, it's really hard to just become a horse farmer if you don't have a background of growing up with horses, of watching horse body language, of knowing how they communicate, of being able to sense, when they have an injury. So I would just want to expose people to it young. And there's a question here that I might have missed the original one. Horses plow, and I do not use a moldboard plow. It's not good for my horses, and I don't like what it does to the land in terms of long-term use. I can see it could be valuable to start out with, but I pretty much only use a cultivator where I'm just really digging in a few inches to the top layer of soil. And so there's a whole variety of tools that you can hitch up for secondary tillage. So if the ground is lumpy, how can I smooth that out? So like we dump manure on the field, we're dumping compost, I can come through with a harrow, and the horse is attached to a harrow, and we just cruise around, smoothing it all out. So yeah, that's fun. I hope that answers the question there. Let's see. Oh, okay, here it was. Yes. Different teams and equipment showcased, but the finishing was still done by tractors, shaping into beds, etc. So there are new tools coming out all the time, including bed shaping tools that can be pulled by horses. There are ways to get horses in and out of hoop houses. These have big open-ended hoop houses, and the horses just cruise right through. There are a lot of amazing tools coming out of Europe right now as well that are very humane, very easy to use, and just fantastic. Yeah. So, and what kind of crops do I plant there? Merla, do you mean in this picture itself or just in general around here?
Well, after you've worked the land with the horses and the cultivator, then what does that enable you to plant?
Oh, yeah. So just to give examples from this year, I planted buckwheat as a cover crop. I planted amazing corn. That was kind of some of the main crops in that area, and also squash. So corn and squash are some of our really big staples here in terms of annual crops. Like if we have space for annual crops, we're probably going to grow squash and corn because that's what gets us through the winter. So we're going to take out when the corn comes down, then we plant garlic. So pretty much anything, can be grown this way. I don't grow small grains because it's just a heck of a lot of work and it's not worth it for me, and I don't have the space to make it worthwhile. But I grow plenty of corn and plenty of squash. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I think there's another slide here coming up. There we go. So here's the half a pony I was referring to earlier. Nutmeg belongs to a friend of mine, but she is a registered miniature horse, and this is a perfectly good size for me. I mean, Nutmeg weighs 200 and some pounds. Imagine having somebody who weighs 200 pounds who's totally happy to pull whatever they can pull for you. That's pretty useful. Like, she pulls firewood, she can pull sleds of soil or compost all over the place. She can just trot me down to the grocery store. You know, cruise around the neighborhood with a cart full of lettuce, me saying, hey, lettuce for sale, you know, come get your fresh lettuce. So Nutmeg, she's perma-cute. She is perma-cute for permaculture. So that's a valuable crop as well. And fantastic size for what I'm doing. So yeah, there's the right pony for the right job everywhere. And let's see, I think there's one more slide and just further learnings. I get distance coaching from Doc Hamill. I highly recommend his videos, his workshops, his coaching. He's extremely patient. I get off a call with Doc and I'm like, wait a minute. He just did to me what he does to the horses, like just the right encouragement, just the right feedback. So for serious study, he's who I've really helped, or who has really helped me. You know, I check out some stuff on YouTube, but be warned, there's a lot of stuff you should not repeat out there. I really like Barry Hook for kind of the philosophical aspect. And of course, the famous Small Farmers Journal has been a big help and inspiration. We're here at Hawthorn Farm. You can look us up, hawthornfarm.org, community events, consulting, classes, and fantastic food. Stop by for a meal sometime if that is safe and appropriate for you. We really enjoy having visitors and enjoy continuing to grow our little farm. There's Duke pulling, the sled was empty at the moment, but he was pulling mud and just creating garden beds as fast as our 20-something-year-old guy could shovel. Duke's 26, but that's really old for a horse. But even for this ancient horse, he was, you know, perfectly capable of putting in a few hours of gentle pulling, and it did him a lot of good. Did everybody good. So that's a little bit about horsepower at the farm, how we use it, how we're learning and growing with it, and just a little snippet of how incredibly fun it is. Are there any other questions?
This is awesome. This has been really awesome. I have got a question.
Yeah.
Mostly because I talked to some of the people who've been to your farm, and I travel the nation and world teaching permaculture. So I have students in different levels of learning. And the question I get all the time is, where should I go next? You know? And I wanted to know, what is the process and how do you facilitate the process of people coming to meet you for, you just mentioned, you know, a meal, a day, a week, a year. How does that work on your farm, and what do you see how you see that changing in the future?
Great question. So our vision is neighborhood farms everywhere, good food within walking distance for everyone, just like Terry was mentioning in the previous presentation. What does it take to have good food within walking distance for everyone? One easy entry point in terms of connecting with us specifically is we have a Wednesday garden day where the whole household and then interested folks show up at 9 a.m. and we just have a socially distant, you know, working on the landscape with a whole variety of tasks, whether it's shoveling compost or whether it's shelling beans in the shade on the front porch. So that is sort of one way to come and get a taste of what we are doing. We've been teaching free online classes through an organization called 21 Acres. We do a monthly homestead skills class. I just did canning tomatoes. Daniel is doing making sauerkraut in October. So 21 Acres would be a place to find our free online classes, and we have people from all over the world sign up for those, and would love to see you there. Yeah, so those are a few ways, and I'm always happy to, you know, answer an email or connect with people. It's been a fairly organic process. This is where we live. This is where we grow. We have ages, or the ages of our farm mates range from 7 to 69. So yeah, I would say our garden days and getting in touch with us online are great ways to start.
And how many farm mates? You said farm mates, so you have other people that live on the farm with you guys?
We have, well, I sort of describe myself and my husband Daniel as the alpha pair of the wolf pack. And
Okay.
then we have, oh gosh, between 6 and 8 other people living on the farm on any given day. Sometimes it's less in the winter time. Sometimes we'll go down to, 5 or 6 people. It was 4 for a little while last winter. But yeah, it's usually around 8 people, and we tend to eat, I would say 80% of our calories from the land here.
And is there like an application process, or do you normally like feed those people living on the farm through people coming to your farm days and just relationship built? Is that how the farm has been populated?
It's very relationship built, and who knows who and who's showing up to garden days consistently and who do we have a sense of. And we've learned over many years of living with people, what do we need to ask ahead of time and be clear? Like, being at Hawthorn Farm is not for everyone, even though we want everyone to have good food. So it's just been great to get to know people who stay here for a long time and find out how it can be a good fit and mutually beneficial.
That was exactly what I did on my research farm. Is I just said, I just didn't like kind of one day a month or just a group of people that show up. And some people I'd ask, I'd say, hey, would you like to stay for a few more days? And then maybe another week. And then before long, they stayed much longer. So it kind of creates an organic relation rather than the kind of disappointment expectation system.
Right. Yeah. There have been some hard lessons along the way of, oh, I didn't know that I needed to say that ahead of time, but apparently I do. That's great.
That's awesome. I love your cheerful spirit about it all. This is, you're such a lively person. And I, just for reference purposes, I talked to a few of your people who've stayed on your farm, and just seeing and hearing the joy of people who've worked with you has been really great. Any other questions? Julie, did you run into any people with questions?
I had my hand up, Kathy here.
Okay.
Yeah, you might want to look into the chat box. Today I listened to the KVAL TV news, which you can probably just Google kvaltv.com and find it. But anyway, and I just found the article from 2019. There's something called Agra Voltaics, which is a company I found now in the East Coast, which I put that on the chat too. But the reporter or the Oregon State University person named Chad Higgins it says that the study, the most productive places on Earth for solar power are farmlands, according to an OSU study published in the Journal of Scientific Reports, which was last year. And if less than 1% of ag land was converted to solar panels, it would be sufficient to fulfill global electric energy demand. But the interesting thing is you don't have to give up the use of the farmland. They have all these sheep on this land, and then maybe other animals too. And they actually said the crops had increased instead of decreased, with the photovoltaics. However, I've attended what's called PIELC.org conferences, Public Interest Environmental Law Conference at the University of Oregon, which has been going on for 40 years. It's the #1 gathering of environmentalists around the world every year. But I did learn about something called desert shine, when they put photovoltaics in huge amounts of deserts down in the Southwest. Although there's not a whole lot of moisture in the sand, some of the little critters that did rely on the moisture in the sand couldn't survive. So I'm not in favor of huge, centralized solar sometimes, but I just thought I'd share this with the permaculture people, and I put some references in the chat box.
Oh, thank you, Kathy.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the people? And you can go ahead and unmute yourself. We have, you got something, Julie? Yeah, if you want to read them, Julie, that'd be awesome.
Okay. A couple of farmers near Cottage Grove, Oregon, have used draft horses for about 20 years. They built a straw bale barn and used biodiesel for farm motors. Is there still a mag to our draft horse farming? A mag for draft horse farming magazine?
Were you asking about is that a magazine?
Yeah, there was a magazine called Small Farm Journal years ago. Remember that?
It's still going. I subscribe. Small
Okay.
Farmers Journal.
What else? Let's see. Do you only, oh, we did that. I've seen this a few times in Mother Earth's farm. Technically, Is there a question there? Do you still need significant human power for the final leveling beds path parts?
Oh, yes, right. We don't, I mean, we often use hand power, especially in our gardens that we designed before we got the ponies. So we have some gardens that are just too small for the horses to really work effectively. So we do that. But in terms of longer rows and things, there are bed forming tools and such to pretty much do whatever you need to do with horses. The main drawback to horses is that they don't have a front end loader. So for loading, loading compost, loading manure into the wagons, loading hay bales, yeah, that's where we all team up. Everybody on the farm gets together and we just move the stall mats, or we just shovel the 10 yards of gravel or whatever needs to be done. But we make a party out of it. Yeah.
Well, I wasn't going to make this comment because you mentioned camels before. I literally made the rule on my farm that once I got to some point, I was going to buy camels. Now, I've since, passed the farm on to other stewards of the farm, and I'm traveling and teaching, but I always wanted to have a camel on the farm. So when you said that, you really touched my heart. Second thing is elephants do have kind of a front end loader. So
yeah.
Maybe you could talk to your husband about elephants instead of, no camels, but he'd tell me you didn't say no elephants.
Oh, that's perfect. He got kind of upset when I bought it. Well, he didn't really get upset, but I bought a cow a few years ago, and he was like, I built you an empire for tiny goats, and now you want a cow. Okay.
Oh man, you sound like myself. Oh my goodness. I came home with cows and goats and all kinds of things on a research farm. I ended up with Scottish Highlands, which are my favorite cow in the world. If you can make them if you just love them, they'll love you right back. And they're the best cows in the world. So.
I loved my cow too. I mean, she was definitely a, still waters run deep kind of creature, but I certainly enjoyed her.
Are those the ones with the bangs that we saw in your slideshow, Dave?
Yes, the Scottish Highlands. Oh, they're just so lovely. So if anyone wants me to give free consulting to their farm, just bring Scottish Highlands and I'll come visit. Also camels, I will come and work on your farm as long as you have camels. Because I've always wanted to pull, plows with camels and things like that. So
Camels and pull.
We have another question. What kind of crops do you plant there?
Oh, that got answered.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Was that my question?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Buckwheat, corn, and squash, and garlic.
Yeah, for this year, and then garlic's coming. So, yeah, that's what we do.
You talked about.
We have about an acre-ish of, garden space where we cycle different cover crops and everything too. And I should mention Anne and Eric Nordell for more inspiration on the horse farming stuff. They've really taught me a lot about working soil in such a way that, it's really growing nutrient dense crops easily without backbreaking work. So, yeah.
That's awesome. Do you grow hardneck or softneck garlic?
I grow both, so that we can kind of have a steady supply of garlic through the year. We eat our hardneck garlic first, usually. I also do a mix of snapping scapes off and not snapping scapes off, because leaving those to harden, really well means that our garlic lasts. Again, I'm so fascinated in how to capture the solar energy and then coast on it all year long and eat really well all year long from what we can grow. Like, I just don't like going to the grocery store anymore because what I can grow is so much more amazing. So yeah, we grow a variety of garlics, everything from Thai purple that's, ripening in June all the way through silver skins that we're harvesting in August.
Oh, I love garlics.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Cool.
May May I ask a question that's not directly related to the horses, but is related to the farm?
Mm-hmm.
Hawthorn? So I remember on a couple of my visits, I was taking a look at your beautiful hazelnut trees.
Mm-hmm.
And I've just planted a few little tiny babies. And I was just wondering how they're getting on. Are they producing, and are you able to beat the squirrels to the harvest?
Great question, Merle. Well, the trees are thriving, and for a couple of weeks there, anytime you walked outside, you would hear squirrels chewing through hazelnut shells. Yeah, we had an amazing year in 2017, and we just gathered bushels. And then the shrubbery has grown back up around the trees and created squirrel highways. So yeah, now this year the pickings were slim. However, we'll just adjust the undergrowth and see what happens next year. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to just make a comment. This is one of my favorite permaculture books. It's called Miraculous Abundance, and it's about a family in Normandy, France, who farm almost entirely with horses. They have carved out a permaculture paradise, essentially, in the middle of what is the French Midwest. And they have come up with a how they believe they could feed. They're very prosperous. They've made an incredibly prosperous venture of this, and they come up with a kind of a spreadsheet on how much food they can produce off a quarter acre, that with using horsepower and animals and virtually no mechanical power. And it's really an amazing, inspiring book, and they do have some videos on YouTube. But I just wanted to, it really inspired me. I mean, reminded me of this when you're talking about what you're doing, because you're doing a really similar thing in Pacific Northwest, which I just really admire. So,
Great. Gosh, thank you, Brent. It's an idea whose time is returning. And yeah, I'm glad to be part of it, glad to pass on the skills. And speaking of time, I think I'm a good chunk over, so I don't want to cut into anybody else's airspace here either.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. And we appreciate you coming. I know you have so much knowledge. Maybe you can come back next year and share something new.
Sounds good. For now, I've got to go milk some goats.
We'll have fun. Pet them for me. I love goats.
All right, great. So great to see you all. Take care.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.